welcome to Our Life. On May 25th, 2020, in real time, 8 minutes, 46 seconds, the United States saw a human being being removed from this world. The question is always why. But today the question should be, what can we do to change? So before I introduce you to some of my guests, let me give you a quick removing the mask fact. Were you aware the first term of police brutality being used in American press was in 1872 in the Chicago Tribune? Also, were you aware our very own Texas Rangers in the 19th and 20th century supported and participated in killing and lynch mobs? So when we return from this break, I'm going to introduce you to my first set of awesome guests while we'll try to peel back some of the masks on change and the state that our country is in today in 2020. So we'll be right back. And we're back, and I am super excited because I have my awesome representatives that represent Houston, the state of Texas, to the best of their ability with what we have going on right now. So I want to introduce, and I'm going to start off introducing with DA for Fort Bend County, Brian Middleton is here with us today. We have State Representative Ron Reynolds here with us today. We have State Representative Jarvis Johnson here with us today. And we have County Judge KP George here with us today from Fort Bend County. So I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your schedule to sit down with us. You are a character.
I didn't say anything.
You're right about that.
Yeah. You are a character.
Y'all got me out of here with us, the Fort Bend County people. So it's okay.
Hey, we not. I'm gonna
be on my best behavior.
And I will too. You're not gonna have me misbehave as well. But let's get this kicked off. So tell me, how do you all view the world today compared to 5 years ago?
I'd like to start off with that. 5 years ago, I believe that we had hope. President Barack Obama gave us inspiration. He gave us a transformational figure that really elevated unity all over this country. He brought black people, white people, young and old together. Today we have division and strife. We have racial tension that we haven't seen since the Civil Rights Movement. Mm-hmm. We have a figure that is the president that is talking about, make America great again. In other words, America wasn't great when Obama was president. America was great when it was about, white nationalism and so many other divisive things. So for me, we have gone backwards, and these last 4 years have been very, very challenging for our country in many regards. As an African American, you see more disparities, more discrimination than for me than I've seen in many years. Yeah. So in many regards, I think we've went backwards.
Sure.
Who else wants to comment?
Go ahead.
I could just piggyback on State Representative Ronald just mentioned, because last 4 years, 5 years, absolutely I agree with him, what happened. But then in the middle of all that stuff, I see hope, a lot of hope. Because 2018, if you really look at in Fort Bend County, the first time ever, we have a person of color, district attorney elected. First time in the history, 185 plus years of history of Fort Bend County. And that happened in 2018. So that, I believe, it is sign of hope. Mm-hmm. And we elected 2 African-American female judges in 2018 and 2 other African-American judges district courts. And I'm the first South Asian to be elected to lead a county in state of Texas, period. So this all happened in the middle of this all, things going on. But I believe I choose to be here. And there is, we always say that I choose to be in America because this is so unique, and this country is an amazing place. So, and I'm so confident things will swing back, and I already see the signs of it. And I think we were holding on to all this despair, and the COVID-19 and George Floyd unjust death snapped it. And so it is like a perfect storm. That's what I see now. And things are changing in such a way. There is hope, and I leave it there. And I like to hear from the other esteemed guests.
Well, for me, 5 years ago, I was 15 pounds lighter. I didn't have as much gray hair, so that's how the world has changed for me to this point. You said for me, you didn't say the world, so I was answering your question specifically as you asked it. But in regards to how I see the world, in all seriousness, I would agree with both of these gentlemen, but I think what we saw was that some of the covers have been pulled back. America has always been what America has always been. In 2008, 2010, 12, we had a wonderful president that did fantastic work that we all believed in. It all gave us hope. But that meant it covered up a whole lot of other hatred. It covered up a whole lot of other racism. It covered up a whole lot of other things. And I think now you fast forward to 2020 and you see a lot of that hate has been uncovered. You have a president that is very divisive. You have a president that is definitively drawing lines in the sand, and people are truly buying into that. But I think God is a just God, and He's pulled back. And people get me wrong when I say, they get me confused when I say this, but I thank God for the pandemic. And people say, what? What do you? And the reason why I say I thank God for the pandemic is because the pandemic has given people an opportunity to now realize some things that we've been talking about for years. I can't breathe is not the first time we've heard that phrase.
No.
Eric Garner said it in 2014.
Yes, he did.
But you didn't see the same type of reaction.
No.
And it was the same type of police force that simply put a chokehold on an unarmed black man. But I think from the pandemic, a lot of people were at home. A lot of people had an opportunity. The days wasn't moving so fast. They had an opportunity to slow down and realize this is unjust. I mean, they had an opportunity to see the whole story.
Yes.
And watch how police officers said he was being unruly or he was resisting, but then here comes the video that definitely shows there was nothing unruly about him. So how do you justify this behavior? Then you see Ahmaud Arbery, and so the story is constantly going on and on. There's a story about the young man McClain.
We're gonna get to all those.
But the point that I'm making is that happened in 2019.
Yeah.
It almost got glazed over. It got brushed over. This happened in 2019. But now, since this COVID, because we're now at home, we've opened the door back up, and now we're starting to see justice starting to happen for his family. But the district attorney had thrown the case out and moved on. But now we're into a point where we can finally start to see justice because people are seeing it and responding and reacting. And fortunately, we have a system that is in place right now that is saying we're going to act quickly and swiftly with rogue police officers and judges and district attorneys that are not doing right.
You have something you want to talk about? What 5 years looks like now versus?
Oh, certainly. I agree with Representative Johnson. I think now the level of consciousness is raised. I think we're better off. I thank God for the pandemic because we were in our feelings, and so when all this happened, we were captive. It was the only thing on TV, so everyone was focused on it and had to witness somebody being killed, from beginning to his last breath on TV. And because of all that happened, it was like perfect timing. And I think we're far better off because I think the whole world's consciousness, I call it the greatest awakening in history. I think that's where we are now, so I'm very optimistic about the future because I think now, as progressives, we have the wind in ourselves and we can achieve a lot of the reforms that we couldn't before. So I'm thankful for where we are.
So what do you guys think? Oh, and this is more for State Representative Johnson and Mr. Reynolds. Do you guys think that we need to start changing legislation, and how hard is it to do that?
Absolutely, we have to change legislation. I mean, those are the laws. I mean, that's what we are in place to do, is to change laws. How hard is it? It's very difficult, especially if you don't have the majority on your side. For instance, I filed a bill last session that wanted to end Confederate Heroes Day in the state of Texas. Confederate Heroes Day, what most people don't know, is actually a state holiday.
And I didn't know that.
I know. I didn't even know until I became
know that.
a
We
state
haven't been
representative.
celebrating it.
Huh?
I said we haven't been celebrating.
It's not
it
about
like that,
celebrating,
really.
but it's still a state holiday that's on the state books that actually says that you get a paid day off to celebrate Confederate heroes. That's oxymoronic in itself. There is no such thing as a Confederate hero. A hero is somebody who does something noble, something selfless, something, heroic.
Yeah.
Well, the Confederacy didn't do that. But my bill, they barely gave me a hearing, and when I finally got my hearing, it was at 3 o'clock in the morning. Everyone was tired. It was like right before session was about to end, but the point was that at least we gave him a hearing, but they never even took my bill up to vote, even in the committee. Since that time, fast forward, they did an article in the Dallas Morning News about my bill on Juneteenth, and I've had multiple calls from my colleagues from across the aisle saying that they read the bill and they are 100% behind me, and they want to see the Confederate Heroes Day go away. So we're making some progress, we're making some change, but it's going to take some time. And there are a lot of other bills that psychological evaluation for police officers was a bill that I placed 2 sessions ago that fell on deaf ears, and we didn't even get an opportunity to vote on a House floor. But we're working towards it, and I think we're gonna move forward this session and get a lot of things done. But we got to flip the House.
That's right.
We got to get more
Yeah.
Democratic
Yeah.
legislators in place.
Yeah.
I would just echo the sentiments of Representative Johnson, but first of all, you can't legislate morality. There are a lot of racist cops that we can change laws, but they're still going to be racist cops. Okay, so we need to work on the people that are in office to make sure that we're holding people accountable, and then making sure that we're eradicating these police departments of races. We do need to change some laws. We need to end qualified immunity. I mean, police officers are almost untouchable because of the laws that are on the books. We need to ban some of these, chokeholds, and there are other things that we can do to protect citizens. There's so many things that we try to do, as Jarvis alluded to last session, with the Sandra Bland bill to basically allow citizens who are on routine traffic stops to not allow officers to arrest them, to just basically give them a citation and let them keep going. Though there are some common sense laws that we can pass, but Jarvis right. Until we get people of good conscience that care about all people, unfortunately, some of our colleagues are controlled by the police unions. The far right, they're beholden to the police unions. The police unions they don't really care about the rights of individual citizens. They just want to protect police at all costs. There are some laws that we can pass to end gypsy cops. Basically, a cop gets terminated from Fort Bend, and then they go to Houston. They go to Harris County. We need to end that, okay? And so there are some things that we can do, but we won't be able to do it until we get other people of like minds. Elections matter. Elections have consequences. As KP said earlier, this is the first time we've had a real progressive district attorney that is not allowing people who look like us to continue to be victims in our criminal justice system. He's speaking out. He's using his platform as a district attorney, talking about, pushing back on bad cops. So we need more district attorneys out there like that. He's one of the very few in this whole country. And so, yes, we have work to do. Jarvis and I are going to continue to fight, but we need people to vote like their lives depend on it, because they do.
So that's my next question for you guys. How important it is to vote and know the person that's running. Just not know their name, but know their background and what they stand for, what have they done previously, and stuff like that.
I just wanted to say something, because these guys are in Austin, but this is an outsider's perspective. You know, when many times as a school board member and also as a county judge visited Austin, and I come back and say that when you see somebody wearing a nice suit and you know you go to their office and have a nice conversation, they're not knowledgeable about all these issues. How many bills filed? Like 7,000? They don't know any of this. So that's the very reason why it is so important to vote. Of course, it's common sense. It's so important to advocate. You got to make that trip to Austin. Go and talk to these people. And when you sit down and talk to people, many times some representatives said, oh, okay, that makes sense. Because they never heard of it. Because understand, these guys worked hard to get there. Some people get lucky. They are in the right place at the right time. And they go in with an ideology in their mind, and they advocate that unless and until we stop and say, hey, things are different. Let me tell you. And so we will do it, and I'm sure you agree with that, right? No way a state representative or a state senator understand all the issues going on. So I believe, answer your question, it is so important, because I always say this, you know, we all agree with, if you don't vote, don't complain, because you have no right to complain. And another thing about it is, if you don't, in our system, when you campaign, I learned one thing. We don't go after people who don't vote, because it's changing a habit. We go after people who go to the poll and say, hey, vote for me because you go to vote anyway. Because we only focus on people who have a habit of voting as a candidate. So what I'm trying to say is that if you don't vote, you don't even exist in the political arena.
Yeah, that's what most people say.
Yeah, and so it is so important. I'm sure you agree with that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Each election cycle, we always have pretenders on the ticket who are pretending to portray themselves to be one way, and then we look and see how they perform once they're in office. It's completely different. So people need to study and look and see who they're voting for. You know, I grew up in Houston. I grew up in 3rd Ward, and so when I was growing up, you had to have a track record to run for office. You know, Ada Edwards, Rodney Ellis, Anthony Hall, everybody that knew what they were about.
Jarvis Johnson,
yeah,
Ryan Reynolds,
yeah.
Brian Middleton.
My people,
You
my people.
gotta just keep saying, you gotta
The
Yeah.
tradition
Yeah.
continues, but I'm saying is that when we were growing up, you knew who these people were and what they were about before they placed their name on the ballot. So they already had the
I
public's
don't think we have that now.
No,
I think
you gotta-
it's anybody.
You
It's
got a
a
lot
free
of
fall.
fakes on the ballot, and people
Yeah.
really need to be vigilant.
Yeah.
And voting is so important. Each election cycle, we say this is the most important election, but no, this is it right now.
Yeah.
You know, and people should not let COVID-19 stop them from voting. Put on your mask, get your hand sanitizer, go stand in line, do whatever because your life really does depend on this election. Because if it goes the wrong way, we lose all this momentum. And in the direction that this country is going in, it's going to be fatal for some people.
So this is going to be 3 parts, kind of. We're gonna. What do you think? How we should go when it comes to the police departments? Also, what are your feelings on the removal of statues, Aunt Jemima, and all this stuff? Where do we go with these
How
things?
much time you got? You can be here all day with that one. At the end of the day, here's the problem. Police officers continue to. We have an imagery problem in the black community. Number one, police officers see black men as a threat. Period.
Yep.
Black man walking down the street with nothing in his hands is more of a threat than a white guy walking down the street.
But no
with,
one can
with
tell
an
me why.
AR-15.
Why?
Because imagery,
It's conditioning.
imagery. They have been conditioned to see us only in a certain light. The television, the music,
Ever since
the
Birth of a
movies,
Nation.
everything.
I mean, yeah.
It's always, we've been told, during Vietnam, soldiers were told that in World War II, they were told we grew tails and horns at night, and people were stupid enough to believe that. But let me fast forward. The point is that the only way we're going to get police officers right, we can put reform after reform after reform after reform in place. As Ron already said, you can't really legislate stupidity and morality. And so you're still going to always have them stupid officers. But once there starts to be a consequence for
Yeah.
that action,
That's it.
officers need to be not arrested, they have to be prosecuted.
Yes.
Once they start going to jail, because I fear for my life. How'd you fear for your life from an 11-year-old boy playing cops and robbers in a park, in an open carry state where even if he was a grown man with a gun, he had the right to?
Yeah.
So how do you say you fear for your life? If you fear for your life, you wouldn't have ran up on him. How did you fear for your life when you have so many individuals running away and you're shooting me in the back? So the fact is that we have to change a culture in America to where we have to stop saying, we believe in cops. I believe in cops all day long, true enough. But in today's society, I don't know how I feel about a cop walking up to my car. I'm fearful of him as he is of me. And the fact is that we've got to change that. We got to get jurors to stop looking at cops as being just, they have a very tough job. They knew they had a tough job when they signed up for it. We can't keep giving them the benefit of the doubt. The evidence is right there. How did you exonerate the 4 that beat Rodney King half to death?
Yeah.
You can't justify that. So, and then the second part of your question is, how do we get rid of these Confederate statues? These are just racist overtones that we continue to hear. You heard me say I have a bill to get rid of Confederate Heroes Day. There is no place in America where we should have statues that demonstrate and places these individuals in a majestic position or looking, heroic or looking like, let's be real about it. Confederacy, Sam Houston was a slave owner. You want to talk about how great he was as a governor? Now let's talk about how horrible he was as an individual, because he owned slaves. And when you own slaves, you're not going to tell me that Sam Houston did not beat his slaves when they tried to run away. You're not going to tell me that he did not try to make the best possible slave that he could make by putting the big buck with this, big busted, big, butt woman. And
Yeah.
because he wants to make the best, that's what they did. It's the same way they did with cows, it's the same way they did with human beings. If you want these Confederate statues to stay, let's make sure we put a placard that talks about how horrible they were, how they raped women, how they,
To
killed.
show the real history
Show
of
the real history. Don't show them
history.
just as being heroic. Don't show them being heroic, sitting on a statue, sitting on a horse. Show the true essence of who they are if you want to use it for educational purposes. And then lastly, statues are not for historic purposes. That's where you go to history books. You want to learn something, go to the books. But when you want to look up to something, you put it in the form of a statue that makes people look up to it and go, oh my God, I want to get to that point in life where I can sit on top of a horse and look majestic. So it's time for those things to go, period. There's no place in society for them.
I'll just add some briefly, and I think Jarvis is right on the money. But when district attorneys can start prosecuting, convicting, and punishing police officers, just like they punish everybody else, that would be a deterrent for other officers.
It would be.
A lot of officers feel like they're above the law. Qualified immunity, exoneration, no indictment from a grand jury. A DA can indict a ham sandwich, but they
Yeah.
can't indict a police officer a lot of times. So until you get more officers suffering the consequences of regular folk, like look at Michael Vick, when they went after him and gave him years for dogfighting.
yeah.
I mean, the value of a black man's life is not much, but a value of a police officer's life is elevated. Until you start treating officers just like everybody else, there's going to be not the same level of consciousness from officers because they believe they're above the law. Just like Trump believes he's above the law when he wasn't convicted on the impeachment and everything else. When it comes to the statues, I believe these statues should be in a museum. Or as Jarvis said in the books, as a teachable moment. Just like you go to the Smithsonian, you look at museums and you look at things like that. But you wouldn't go to Germany and see a statue of Hitler. You wouldn't go to other places and see the oppressor statues. So in America, you shouldn't see these Confederate statues glorifying slavery, glorifying the Civil War, glorifying General Robert E. Lee, glorifying the Confederate flag. That's a symbol of hate and division. And so I think they need to be in museums. I don't think they should be eradicated as a symbol of pride. They're a symbol of a dark part of our history. And until we make amends for it, including reparations, our country will continue to carry that sin forward.
And I definitely agree. You need to teach the true history
That's
of,
right.
of everything.
That's exactly
From
right.
slavery on down. Teach the true history. Don't sugarcoat or
Yep.
water it down
That's
or
right.
hide what they really are.
I
So-
still don't believe they should be
In museums,
either.
you don't believe it?
And because they don't need to look, because we're making them look like, we're making them look heroic. We're making them look majestic. They're
Well,
sitting on
if
top. Show them with the whip in their hand, whipping a slave. Now that's your true essence of who you are.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Show
If you're
me
gonna
that.
put them in a
You're not
museum,
showing me
then
that.
give me the whole
I
true
want the
write-up
whole
of
truth.
them. If you still gonna put them in a museum,
Ron
because
gonna beat me up
when
later.
we're in
Go
when
ahead.
we're in museums,
No,
they're
yeah.
putting the whole truth about.
Yeah,
The
Holocaust
underground-
Museum.
yeah,
It talks
they-
about
the whole
these
truth.
atrocities.
So don't
okay?
hide their truth. And y'all want to say anything?
Yeah, I do want to add something.
Before I
You
move
know,
on.
my Christianity comes first in my life. And when we talk about these statues, you know, the Bible speaks against idolatry. And so these statues are an example of idolatry. Why do we exalt these so-called heroes and build statues? I mean, these statues are vestiges of a past gone era when there was overt racism and Jim Crow laws and all sorts of other things. We don't need to celebrate that now. And if you're a
No.
real Christian, you shouldn't want these statues, period. For police officers, what we have is a history of double standards, you know, and that's the problem. The laws that are in place right now are sufficient to eradicate police misconduct. It's just that we've had a double standard in our society, and they have been allowed to get away with misconduct. And I think right now the consciousness that we have is that people recognize that police officers are human beings. They have frailties. They're not perfect people. And when they cross the line, they too should be prosecuted.
Okay. So I'm gonna add. You want to say something on that? Christopher?
No, I just want to say something very different about before we mentioned about perception. See, that's coming from an outside. You know, I didn't grow up here. I didn't grow up with African Americans. You know, I just came as an adult to live in United States, and I have noticed in Asian community, Indian community, and all that perception still exists. If you walk on the street, you know, if you see an African American guy coming towards you, sometime you go the other way. And that exists, and I'm saying from an outside perspective,
Yeah.
and I see that, and I from a long time ago I started interacting with the community. I get to know the community, and we all know each other for a long period of time. So I don't feel that way. My family doesn't feel that way. But the hope part is, my 17-year-old daughter, she's angry about what happened to George Floyd. I mean,
Oh, wow.
yeah, she's angry. And so that's the hope for our country, because she's not African American, but she see injustice. Does that make sense? And so that's give me hope, and I see so many hundreds of kids behaving that way because they feel they don't look at color, they don't
No,
look
they-
at they look
they
at the value, they look at the life, and so that gives me hope and a future wonderful hope for this country.
So my last question to you guys: what are some words of wisdom, encouragement, tips to stay strong and make a positive change that we can share as Houstonians, for the American people, Houstonians in general? I know Harris County is large. We got Fort Bend County. We got this county, that county. How can we all come together as one to sit down and have meetings to try to stay on a positive track, especially now when we have COVID, that, you know, that's a whole nother. So give me some words of encouragement for the racial tension, the police brutality, because that's going to be a process of changing everything with that. And also COVID. We can't leave that out.
Can I go first with that? Because when I looked at the protests, what happened in New York, what happened in Washington, D.C., what happened in England, that's not all African Americans protesting.
No, that was
Okay?
something very
And
different.
so I see young children of any color walking and protesting because they see that is injustice. Yeah, color is one thing, but the thing about it is injustice. It doesn't, when it happened to anybody, it need to be stopped. It need to be protested. We have to stand up and say that is wrong. and I see the word of encouragement is it's time more than any time ever in the history of our country, and I think it is important we should stand together. Absolutely, in our county and all, we are doing everything possible to be together. And I call Brian if I have a question, because I consider him as my legal mentor, and so we help each other. We look up to each other, and also I just wanted to say, let's guide our children because they are the hope. And if it wasn't for that 17 minutes video, we wouldn't know what happened.
No.
And that's a 17-year-old, 10 minutes video, whatever that is, 17-year-old girl did
Yeah.
that. So that gave me hope. And let's be together. And and also I say about Asian community, we had numerous Zoom meetings and stuff like that. What is our role in it? But the one discussion came out was this fight for justice was heavy lifted by African American community all along. Because one time it was all about that community, but not anymore. We all are here, and Fort Bend County have 122 languages are spoken in Fort Bend County, one of the most diverse in the country. And it is, it is of course often happening to African Americans, and that is one of the reasons why I just wanted to stand with that community. And under my watch, under Brian's watch, this is not okay in Fort Bend County, and that is my thought. This is not okay, and we are not going to accept that as the norm. We are not going to do that. That's the promise I have. Those who are listening, those who are viewing this, that's the promise I have. We are not going to stand. Why it happened in 2018, and we got elected. I'm the top elected official in Fort Bend County. Brian is the top prosecutor. And that's why it is possible. So coming back to, again, how important it is to get out and vote. And I was just talking to my daughter the other day, and she was saying, Dad, this time around, if some people don't go vote, I don't know what to tell them.
We're going to be in trouble if we don't go vote.
Right.
Thank you.
Especially in
Thank you.
November, because
Yeah.
I'm being on my best behavior because, who's next so we can run say the words of encouragement. I'm going to be on my best behavior.
Words of encouragement?
Yeah, for with everything that we've been dealing with. From
Well, the word of
COVID
encouragement
to,
that I have is empathy. We must have empathy. I think what you see is a lot of people are now seeing things that normally in their busy lives they would have just kind of brushed over.
Yeah.
But now I think the empathy is there. I think people continue to have empathy, and they're starting to truly see, and like the example of your daughter being upset because they're seeing things for what they are and how they are. There's inequalities in our society, not only in social justice, but in economics as well. So if we're going to, as we move forward, I want people to empathize with the fact that Black people made this country what this country is,
Yes.
regardless of what people want to say, how they want to disagree, but the free labor that this country had for 400 years built tremendous wealth amongst a lot of people. And from that time, there's been a systemic way of keeping that wealth away, which has led to then other problems. Lack of education leads to, obviously, problems of crime.
yeah.
And then when there's the problem of crime, leads to the problem of policing, and so it becomes a vicious cycle. So I'm supposed to be encouraging, and I'm trying to get there. But the point is that I want people to understand. Let's not forget. Let's not just, we're singling in on this and saying, yeah, we want social justice, but the pandemic has demonstrated that we have a health inequalities as to why Black people are leading the numbers of COVID cases.
Yeah.
And so those are the issues that we have. So I ask all the people that are watching and that are out there, let's continue to be empathetic for one another. Let's continue to try to see if we can walk a mile in each other's shoes to understand what we have to do for each other. Let's truly be our brother's keeper.
Yeah.
And share in this opportunity to have resources, share in this opportunity to have the American dream.
Stop competing and sit down and listen to each other and understand we're not always going to agree. We will sometimes disagree, but it's still okay. Give me your words of encouragement.
So, first of all, it's been an honor to be on the show.
Thank you.
Dr. Martin Luther King said it this way, that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. I would encourage everyone to continue to have faith. Just like it took so many years for us to have freedom from slavery, just like it took so many years for us to have the Civil Rights Law and the Voting Rights Act would afforded us the opportunity to serve today. I believe that we're on the right side of history. I believe that the George Floyd's death was a watershed moment in our country of people coming together of all races saying, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And that I believe that it is going to be a cosmic shift to new reforms. So I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing. I want people to have faith. I want people to stay prayed up. I want people to stay encouraged. I want people to understand that we are moving in the right direction and that we are going to make tremendous changes and strides. But in the meantime, people have to stay encouraged. We have to be, as Jarvis said, our brothers and sisters keeper. We have to love on one another. And I'll just say finally, you know, I don't know, I can't speak for everybody else, but what I would encourage everyone is to find something higher than yourself. It's my faith is what sustains me. And I want to continue to pray for everybody during these tough times, to stay encouraged that we will get to the other side of it. And I believe that we'll be even stronger and we'll have a testimony. You can't have a test without a testimony. And what we're seeing now is a great test for a greater testimony. And finally, a setback is a setup for a comeback. And this setback with COVID is a great setup for a tremendous comeback.
You better say it.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
a tough one to follow.
Yeah, I know. I agree. Ron and I have been on a lot of podiums together. You know, I agree with him. We have a watershed moment right now. I've said that it's our new Rosa Parks moment, and we may make good use of it. And in order to do that, we have to be vigilant. We have to vote. Unfortunately, if you're engaged in protests, if you're upset and you're not registered to vote and you do not vote, you're wasting your time. Might as well have been doing something else because that's the only thing that's going to move us forward.
Yeah.
In terms of what we need to do, you know, we've got to end the hypocrisy. I think each person needs to look in the mirror and ask the question, are my actions and my words in agreement? If they're not, then you have some personal work that you need to do. To the extent that we can end hypocrisy, we will improve as a society. I think our consciousness is worldwide is greater. But as soon as because our values are fine, you know, all men are created equal, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We say this stuff all the time, but how we living is different.
Yeah.
So until we remain true to our creed, then we're going to struggle. So right now it's time for people to engage in introspection and check themselves so we can move forward.
All righty. Well, I want to say thank you all for coming. I definitely have to have you guys again. I did not know Jarvis was the jokester on here,
Yeah,
but
you
I'm
know.
glad I
You
know.
know?
I'm glad
They
I
didn't
know.
tell you?
No, they didn't tell me. So when we come back, guys, I'll have my next group of guests with me, and we're going to continue this conversation on change. So we'll be right back. And we're back now to continue our talk on change, police brutality. So I have Ms. Venetia with us here. She is an activist. I have Pastor Childress is here with us. And I have Mr. Edward Gordon, Chief Investigator for Fort Bend County. Fort Bend County is represented today. Thank you guys for all being here on this segment. We're going to jump right into it. And I want to start with you, Venetia. What is one thing that got you inspired to become an activist? Because that's...
Well, you know, it's interesting because in 1999, I attended Mississippi Valley State University, and that's the year I graduated with my bachelor's in social work. And at that time, I received several awards, and there was two that stand out for me. One of them was Student of the Year, and I was like, okay, I get that. I was the the head honcho student for criminal justice and social sciences, but the other one was Activist of the Year. And I remember when I received the award, I just smiled, and just all inside of me, I was like feeling unauthentic, unworthy, didn't really know what an activist was. And it really wasn't until my mid-30s, living a long life of being bold, being bossy at times, direct, and absolutely unapologetic. But in my mid-30s, I encountered my perfect storm. And my perfect storm was I had just became a contractor for both CPS, the Child Welfare System, because I am a therapist by training. I became a contractor for the Texas Department of Juvenile Justice. And I also have a son who was diagnosed with ADHD in our public education system. And so at that time, I had encountered all the disparate outcomes that were going on in the system that I was trying to serve as my moneymaker, as a vendor. And then I also encountered some very unique challenges as a parent of a student, a black male student with disabilities. So it was in that moment where my boldness, my passion, my fierceness, and my maternal instinct was truly activated, and I saw it before my eyes, and it made everything make sense. It made my whole plight from the time I was 22 years old make sense. So it was only at that time that I was like, oh, yeah, I earned that award about, a couple decades ago. So it kind of, someone else saw it in me before I could see it in myself. It took a while for me to realize that I was operating in that particular scope.
Do we have to have some type of community training for activists? Because when dealing with the public and police, because a lot of people I see today that call themselves activists is screaming, hollering, cussing, carrying on, yelling, and
Just what it is.
I don't think that's the way activists should be to get that point across.
I do think that activism is a wide spectrum. I consider myself a professional activist. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I operate at the pinnacle of my social work field. I groom not only new social workers, but I also groom aspiring activists. And what I typically do is say you have to know the jargon, you have to know the science, you have to do open records requests, you have to be able to talk policy and procedure, you have to be able to code switch and talk in a boardroom with those who hold power and talk in layman's terms to the community to mobilize and transfer power. So there is science behind activism if you truly want to be effective, but I don't really knock anybody that steps into this arena because this is not an arena for everybody. It takes
No, it's not.
Yeah, it takes an innate passion and ability and a willingness to be knocked down and get back up again and fight. And there's a lot of people that talk the talk, but there are only few that can walk the walk.
Exactly. For Pastor Childress, what are your views on the times we're in now?
I think this is a watershed moment in our history. When we look at what's happening now, I believe that the world is going through a major paradigm shift. Nothing stays the same. And I think that we are experiencing it right before our eyes. When we look at what's going on in our society, you take all the isms, racism, classism, sexism, ageism, you name it, it's all coming to the forefront. In light of what's happening, in particular now with what went on with George Floyd, what's going on with the pandemic that we're in, and also the economic disparities that we are experiencing, I think it's right there before our eyes. So what are we going to do with it now? In light of racism, which I believe is the big pink elephant in the living room, that's finally
It's not pink no more.
That's finally it's come to the forefront.
Yeah.
You think about here in this city, the city of Houston, over 60% of all babies, all kids under the age of 4 that are being born are now black and brown.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that happen all across, I believe, this world in cities that have the population to warrant those kinds of statistics. And so when you think about that, and you think about the election that is coming up, you think about the racial divide that we are experiencing, I think it's all interconnected, that all this is interconnected from politics all the way down to what's happening in the streets. And so I think now we're being forced as a country, we're being forced as a people. And what are we going to do with it? Are we going to come together? Are we going to attack these isms? And I believe that we are. I think that the previous guest you had on said it well when they mentioned the fact that I believe God placed us in this pandemic for a reason and for a purpose. We all are still. He did say, be still and know that I'm God. And to get our attention, he set us down. So now we have to sit down. Everybody's looking at television. Nobody's going back and forth. We all focus. And I believe that our attention span now is on really what's happening in our society. And so think about it. You think about we are not, as a people, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, no matter what color we are, scientists say that we are 99.9% all the same.
Well, we are.
There's only a 0.1% of difference. And we're forced with that. And I believe as for example, as African Americans, I don't believe we have trouble with that. We have assimilated well, we have adapted well, we have handled our counterparts very well. We live in our communities, go to their churches, work on their jobs, and go to their stores. And I think now we're at a point now where how do we meet halfway, just in terms of them catching up with us, but at the same time we're going through our shift of trying to understand what is the next move that we're in. So I believe it's a sign of the times. We have to really look at where we are as a people. We're coming together.
Yeah.
In the next 30 years, it's going to look totally different in terms of the racial makeup in our society.
So, Mr. Gordon, how do we, where we are right now, how do we attack this police reform, the situation going on with police officers? First, give me a little brief one-on-one when you're being stopped. Because like I told you before, I do not think you could win against a police officer when you are stopped on the street. I really don't think you can.
Well, first of all, traffic stops, they're very, very dangerous, even for police officers. But the thing that I recommend to people, if you get stopped by a police officer, just be nice, be courteous. The thing you have to remember, you're not trying, even if you feel the reason that you're being stopped, that it's not reasonable, you have your chance in court to be able to go and prove that. But I would advise people not to engage with the officer. And, if you feel uncomfortable about it, if you carry a cell phone, you got a recorder.
Yeah.
Turn it on. There's nothing wrong with recording the traffic stop and letting the officer know, because he or she should be recording you as well.
Yeah.
But the main thing, just don't engage in an argument with them. You got a day in trial. If it gets to where it feels bad and you're not comfortable with the way things are going, dial 911.
Okay. What do you think about how police departments right now are really being shaken up tremendously? And what do you see? Because what I see now is, yes, we need to reprimand bad officers. We need to take them out totally. But the position in some states, how they have it now, where if police officer approaches you in the wrong way, grab you the wrong way, however, it goes the wrong way, that police officer gets fired, and he may not be a bad police officer. He just did what he thought was the best. How the good ones manage their daily job? We're not, you know what I'm trying to say, without being accused of being a police brutality.
Well, you have good officers out there, and they do their jobs. And a lot of times when they come down to using force, if it leads to that force, it doesn't look good. But the main thing that we have to do is that we have to get rid of the bad officers, because as long as you have bad officers out there, it's going to make the good officers look bad. And it all starts at the top. Leadership. It has to start there. The hiring process, the process you have to go through, people need to be held accountable and get away from officers getting in trouble, quitting, going to another department. They call that gypsy cops.
Yeah.
We need to get away from that. And I think leaders should be held, even at a criminal standard. Hey, that's your job, that's your chief. If that's a bad cop, he needs to be go. And it needs to be noted. He should lose his license and not be a cop anymore.
So I know they go through mental evaluations when they're first apply to be police officers.
Yes.
Is that the only time?
It's the only time. That is one of the things that even when I talked to DA Milton about it, we need to look at these people that's doing the psychological tests. Because I have seen in my years where people they take the test, they fail for whatever reason, and then they go somewhere else to someone else and take it again and they get passed. Those people also should be held accountable. They should go through a certain process. Only certain ones should be able to evaluate people for police officers.
Okay, okay. So how do you guys think that activists, pastors, police, and the public can all work together? Because I think now we all need to actually come together and work together as one to get the bad police officers out, for one, to change some laws, for two.
I think we need to come together. I think we need to work together. One of the things that I'm trying to implement is to be able to put on training for you guys to come together, so you have an idea. This is what we do. This is how we train, and some of the things we go through, while you can share things with us. So that way, when we do have a problem, we can all come together, and not just one time. You know, just interact constantly.
And I think too, I appreciate you saying that, and I think too, finding a way to I mean, I don't know what the recruiting process is, but the police department, I think, should look like the community it also represents. And I don't know what the recruiting process. I know I've been told that many of minorities who go through the academy may not pass the academy. I don't know if that's by design. I don't know what it is, but I think finding a way where we all can come together and start a recruiting process out of churches and out of communities and out of high school. Make it a vocational training in high schools, like they have vocational trainings for welding and for different type of workshops for kids to be able to do something, because college may not be for everyone, for all of our kids, but finding an alternative. And so I think that the recruiting process is huge, and finding a way to inspire African American men and Hispanic men and women and to be able to say, I want to be a cop, you know, I want to be a peace officer. And how can I become one? And I think that starts early. I think churches can help with that, schools can help with that. And I think that's a practical solution, because I think all of us would probably feel a little bit more comfortable if you see a minority cop and a white cop coming at you at the same time, instead of just, I'm not saying that that's a perfect scenario, but at least I feel as though that I'm in a more comfortable position.
Because I don't think we have community no more. You know,
Exactly.
back in the day, you had the community, and if that mother was a single mother, she had the neighbor next door that was able to help. We don't have that anymore. It's like everybody's out for their own.
Well, I'm in the position as an activist to challenge our current construct of what we call law enforcement. I am championing dismantling the current system. I found, as a licensed clinical social worker I'm a critical incident stress management responder. I go to the scene typically after police have left. And it's such a disjointed approach, but with true integration, interdisciplinary approach, and collaboration, we can create some real practice models, some best practices that can respond to kidnapping, that can respond to domestic violence, that can respond to mental illness. Right now in Fort Bend County, our crisis intervention team is an exceptional example of how integrated models with both social services and police and community partners, community organizations can traffic mentally challenged individuals away from the criminal justice system, where they don't even have to go in and be documented and criminalized just to get services 6 months later, or not at all. Services and responding to the need is at the forefront right now when it comes to crisis intervention in Fort Bend County. And that's just one of the many models that we can develop to meet the unique and individualized needs of these very vulnerable groups, the homeless. These are the groups that are being oppressed, that are being trafficked, just as standard business as usual through our system, that are never seeing a social worker or a social services agency until they've been stamped, docked, and booked, because that sustains the criminalized system. Everybody benefits from that trafficking, but the individual that's being caught up, they don't get a benefit at all, or until it's too late, they become a number and become aligned and trapped in that system. And we're better than that as Americans. We have too many resources, too many departments with multiple $1 million that are acting in a fragmented way, and in my opinion, to serve themselves, than to really create a streamlined approach, a best practice models to really liberate and elevate these vulnerable groups. So I'm also willing to work with the pastor and, of course, law enforcement, as long as they are open to looking at law enforcement different, being the change we want to see. I'm at the table.
Okay. Do you answer that last question? Where do we go from here to make a positive change? She
Yes.
She gonna be the one to organize this whole meeting right here.
I have no problem with
Just
that.
call us to organize the whole meeting. So my last question to you guys, before we close out this segment, what were your thoughts on the burning, looting around the entire country? And I'm asking each of removing the monuments, TV shows, all that stuff.
Well, I'll just be honest and say I believe it all happened to get us here. If any one of those particular elements didn't happen, I wouldn't feel confident that we would all be here. The good, the bad, and the so-called ugly. I don't sit at a moral high ground or a place of elevated righteousness to judge any particular entity. I know from my experience, change is hard, and it comes with long suffering, struggle, loss, and even death. That is the reality our past has taught us. And so I just sit in a position, thank God for everybody's contribution, and now where do we go from here? With the monuments, I think all of that is a part of dismantling this culture. But those are all appearances. We have some deeply rooted issues that need to be addressed and need all hands on deck. So that's my position.
I think positive protest is good. I think protesting in the streets is needed. If you go back to the 60s, during the time of the civil rights movement, you have to have agitation in the streets and legislation at the top. And so I think politicians and people in the streets coming together, I think that's huge. You know, you have to have somebody. We need legislation in Congress, the Senate, and legislation of our elected officials going to the White House and speaking our voice and stating our demands, but at the same time, we have to have that agitation in the street. We needed Malcolm and Martin. You know, we needed both movements in order to achieve our goal, and we did it. And now I don't believe in looting. I say peaceful protest. I think looting gets us nowhere. You know, we don't need to tear up our communities. But what's different about this time, as someone previously mentioned, is people from all walks of life who are out there now. And protesting. We have to have that. Now, the tearing down of the monuments, I totally agree. I believe the monuments need to come down. I believe the stereotypes need to be done away with. I 100% believe in that. Now, how we do that, I have no idea. Now, if Congress or the government is not going to do it, they need to be brought down in some shape, form, or fashion.
Well, they're not going to do it because the preschooler is stopping folks from taking money. I'm gonna behave. I'm not gonna. behave. But
I don't know if you remember, just a few years ago, when you talk about history, in the state of Texas, they were getting ready to put something in the textbooks about the Hispanic population, a part of history that was inaccurate or was not fully told, and LULAC protested and went to Austin and went before the state legislators, and they had to pull that out of their plans to put that in the history books. And that's what protests would do for you. History, I'm a history major, I have a degree in history. When you talk in history, I had a white professor, Stephen F. Austin, to tell me that history is just what it is. It is his story. It is his story. So I think now in 2020, we have to now tell our story. We're not rewriting history. We're just telling our story, and the story that he told and she told was from his perspective, and it wasn't the complete truth. So, as someone said earlier, if you're going to have the monuments, tell the complete story.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, tell the complete. But now that we have Google, we have knowledge at our fingertips. You know, kids and people can look for the truth for themselves. And I think that if we're going to have monuments, let's tell the whole story about those monuments, because and not a partial story. And we have to start telling our story. I know we have to go.
Yeah.
And I think it's vitally important. It is vitally important for us as African Americans to start teaching our kids from our churches and our schools their history. You know, we have a history, the correct history, and in our history, because we have a history that has not been told. And if you know where you're from, I believe that it can also control your destiny about where you're going, where you're headed.
It can.
And we need to. I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
and this is a perspective that we often forget, is that we need to start telling our history to the dominant culture. They need to know the truth.
Everybody needs something. So. Your statement needs to be real short.
Positive protest.
Positive
protest. And the thing about it is, we have to listen, we have to reach out, and we have to continue to go forward, and not go backwards and not forget.
Okay. Okay. Well, I want to thank all of you for being here with me. They looking at me side-eyed. So we're going to be right back in our last segment, and we're going to talk about business, because I think also this is a good time where you need to learn business, get educated on it, so you can open up your own stuff. So we'll be right back. And we're back in our last segment, and I have with me the owner of Spirit Podcast, my wonderful home where I tape at, Mr. Gary Lee with me.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate
And I
it.
have Mr. Lloyd Floyd with me as well. So tell me each about your companies.
Sphere Podcast Studios here in Houston, Texas. We were founded back in 2015 as a Sphere Podcast Network. And we were built on the concept of changing the perspective of African Americans in the media, because at the time it was the rise of your reality TV shows, and I think someone mentioned it earlier on the show. It's the stereotypes that are perpetuated over time, over decades, over centuries, that brainwash people to treat another nationality a certain way. So the design was to change that narrative via podcast, via video podcast. But as the network continued to grow out of my home, the desire to help other individuals came along. So that's why I built the Sphere Podcast Studio, so that not just what was on our network, but anyone could come in and tell their story, could come in and control their narrative and get their vision out. And I own a IT business, which allowed me to fund this business and get this up and going. So one business that's almost 20 years old, and then this new venture that's now almost or creeping on 5 years old. So it's been a good journey.
Mr. Lloyd.
We started the Black Store Beauty Supply Experience. Our biggest thing is always making sure that we're big on activism. My other group is called Creative Group Economics. We know that anything that comes from fighting for the black community, it goes to have to be economically sound, whether that be criminal justice, education, anything that we want to fight for, politics as well. So what we wanted to do first is build that economical base. And what that started was is building businesses that exploit the black community. And so one of the biggest businesses that exploit the black community is beauty supply stores.
For real.
We literally, on my street, have 4. They each make $5,000 to $10,000 a day from just selling hair and beauty supply products.
Where is it located?
Off 8616 Cullen,
Okay.
Cullen and 610.
Perfect.
That's a perfect location.
So again, and a lot of people don't, I would say black-owned beauty supplies didn't want to put them in, not only in the hood, but next door to other Asian beauty supply stores, because that made it hard for them to get the supplies and things to kind of stay competitive. But we didn't see that being one of our obstacles, which is not as much, because we got other support and other partners and other things that we do. But we just want to make sure that we only build businesses that pretty much exploit the black community. So this is just one of the first steps. And inside this beauty supply store, we're gonna have a nail shop, barber shop as well. So we want it to be a one-stop
shop.
Yeah, and basically we only got one rule, not that anybody can't buy from us, but your skin is your ticket in. And what we're gonna do, we have a whole wall we're featuring over 40 to 50 just black-owned brands that don't get that stardom in other beauty supply stores or shelves in general. So it goes by that whole sharing and just kind of making it happen.
Okay. So as business owners and black business owners, tell us how much work it truly takes on a daily basis.
So here's the thing. The work ethic and the grind, and I'm sure you can attest to this, it's, I would assume, the same for anyone who wants to strive for excellence. You know what I'm saying? It's for anyone who wants their business to thrive, for anyone who wants to build legacy. But not just that, but also making sure you take care of your employees, your staff, make sure all those things are sound. So that's, I would assume, is the same for every ethnicity, every nationality. What's cumbersome and challenging for African Americans is having to go to a European American bank, an Italian American bank, to ask for a loan. to get funding for your dream or your vision because the opportunities don't exist from people who look like us, right? So it's solving that problem, which then in turn helps every African American get a foot in the door of capitalism, because now we can depend on our own to fund our dreams and visions.
For sure. Oh,
No.
look, look. He led right into what I was about to say, and that comes through the uniqueness of the businesses that we're building. Like, we built it with, it's a corporation, C Corp, and it comes with shares of stock, and that's how we raise money for it. We didn't have to go to a bank or institution that really wouldn't have gave us the money anyway to actually get this done. So, you know, our biggest thing is showing people independence through cooperative, creative group economics. So, you know, we wanted to make sure, and like you say, the grind is infinite. I'm never not working, even though I tell people it's a different type of work. When you was clocking in, you clock 9 to 5. When you went home, you didn't have to worry about certain things. Me, I can go home, watch a movie, and it still be nighttime, and to get up like, man, I still got something to do. And it's just a different type of work, but it's work that is going to be so much more fulfilling at the end, because, you know, a lot of people's biggest thing is they don't have to answer to nobody. But they take that as, oh, I get to work less, but that's not true.
No,
you work
it's not.
more, you know, but it's
not.
more of your own work. It's more of the creative. And, you know, I've been in corporate, management information systems, IT as well. You know, I probably didn't go as far as in depth, but I done been, you know, support analysts, different companies. And I realized that none of these people, I had to kiss too much behind to get to the point where I wanted to be. And anything that don't depends on my work ethic, on how hard I work, in order that's how much I'm going to be rewarded, then that just didn't seem equivalent to me. And most people say, I didn't complain about it, I just went and created my own. And I think that's what a lot of us need to do.
So that's my next question. What tips do you guys can give us to educate people on how to start their own business and make it successful? Because I think with some of us, we have to understand you can open up a business, but it may not be fully successful, and you seeing that return until maybe 5 years later, you know. So, and you have to understand that if that's what you want to do, you can't just quit. You have to continue on. So what tips?
I mean, my biggest thing is, I would say, is all about consistency, because you know, it took me 3 years out of corporate America to get to a business that we now own and have. And I think a lot of people, before I started this business, I went to every black-owned beauty supply store before we started this, because I didn't want to recreate the wheel. I said, let's start a business partnership. Let's see how I can license out your name. You get a royalty forever for investing in this. I wasn't asking for money. I was bringing money. But a lot of people, by us not being as business inclined in some natures, or just naturally suspicious, we don't take or see those business opportunities. So my biggest thing is just don't let anyone count you out, because a lot of people not count you out, but they won't have your same vision in mind. And sometimes you can't let that deter where you're trying to go. Because a lot of people say, you sure you want to call it the Black Store? You sure you want to put a fist in the name? I say yes and yes. You know, because some things I just want us to be obvious and upfront about it. And we only sell to 99% black people. So I didn't see what was the problem.
We've got $1.3 trillion worth of buying power. That's the GDP of Russia. We are our own country within this country, if we wanted to be, if we united. And to you know, take or piggyback off of what you just said, you know, I learned a lot of things growing up from my father. You know, shout out to him. I mean, he was a wonderful man. And one of the things that I would say for any business owner that's watching this right now, find a mentor. Find someone who is doing what you want to do, so that you don't have to make the mistakes that they made. You know, my father was in IT, worked for the government, opened his own company decades ago, and which inspired me to do the same. And I watched my mother support him, so it allowed me to kind of follow in his footsteps and pivot, not to make those same essential mistakes that he made, that he learned from. I just got the lesson, but not the consequence, right?
Yeah.
So that would be something I would give people. Secondly, start with the end in mind. Don't ever start a business and you're just walking out the door not knowing where you're trying to go. Because if you start at the destination, work your way backwards. Now you've created a path, and you can hit milestones and check off action items that need to happen to ensure the success of your business. And the last piece that I would give anybody that's trying to create a corporation, whether it's a C Corp, whether it's an S Corp, whether it's an LLC, don't do anything less than an LLC because you don't want to lose your money, your house, your personal assets. Make sure that you leverage your existing environment. Meaning if you're at a job right now, take them nuggets from that job. Take those jewels, those gems from what you're doing because you're getting on the job training. You can make that applicable in other industries. So it may not necessarily be your passion, it may not necessarily be your promise or your purpose, but take where you're at and leverage that knowledge because that is priceless.
Okay. So how important is it for people, because I think with a lot of African American people, we do not believe that we can do anything. And people need to know that you can do anything. Put your mind to it, you can do it. Don't let somebody tell you you can't do it.
I think it's more about examples. You know, like my dad, he was an entrepreneur most of his life, but he taught me to go to school, get an education, get a good job. And it wasn't until I got that good job until I realized, hey, I'm just like him. I want to be an entrepreneur, and you know, and this doesn't fit the way I feel right here. And once I realized, and I think that was his same thing, he realized that that wasn't something that he wanted to do. But instead of us passing on that independence, you know, we kind of got caught up in the integrationist type mentality and felt like we needed to, the only way to succeed is the way that they tell us we can succeed. So I just think it's just a lack there of examples, but that's why in our business, anybody that comes in the community that want to ask a question, I'm here, I'm passing on the knowledge because can't nobody stop with what I'm doing, and I would definitely want to see how I can pour into what other people is doing.
Yeah, examples are important. I mean, we see that today. If you there is an old saying that I heard that if you've never seen someone do it, then you may not know it exists, right? How many kids didn't even contemplate that they could be the president of the United States until they saw someone that looked like them become president?
And then they
Become the district attorney of Fort Bend.
Yeah.
Become a business owner that owns the Weather Channel, you know, that looks like us. Become these essential people in our society that really aspire for greatness. And you can look at it today. How many kids grow up wanting to be basketball players, rappers, and all these other entertainment style figures? It is not, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but that tells you about the mentality of people in society. There's a mob mentality. So if I see something in it and it is right and just, I therefore lean towards what I see. So if I'm in an environment and this is what I see, then more than likely I am going to follow a very similar path. Same way, or you can juxtapose that to communities that have doctors, lawyers, engineers, and all these other people in their neighborhoods. Guess what the kids grow up wanting to be? What they see.
Yeah.
So if you start changing the vision, you change what people are seeing, you change what success looks like, that optics, that's what people will follow. This ain't rocket science.
No, it's really not. Where do you think, our last question, where do you think we are in the world today as Black business owners with everything that's going on?
Oh, I'm going to let you take that place.
Well, I'm going to just say that Rodney Ellis and them just released a disparity study, and it shows that even just in this city of Houston that we get 0.5% of the contracts that's contracted. And that's not minority, that's Black. And I think when we talk about it, I think it's not enough, not just examples, but relevant education that goes into actually practicality of our lives. Even when it comes to school, I went to business, got a business degree, MIS and stuff like that, but they didn't teach me anything about running or knowing how to come and run a business.
Because they didn't want you to learn that.
So I think it's just certain things we have to get a little bit more diligent in what we're teaching and what we want our kids to know and learn. So
We're right. And I think we're at a great precipice. We're at a great moment right now where we can leverage this situation. And I think about this from a business perspective. We are an industry. African Americans are an industry, just like European Americans are, just like Asian Americans are, just like Mexican Americans are. These are industries that can run and do things. It would be great if we had something very similar to like a Black Lives Matter financial group or PAC that focused on some specific things financian.
I just saw that this morning. Someone was talking to Black Lives Matter needs to create like their own politician group.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know, for
They need some money group.
Well, and,
business
and
group.
here's the idea.
Economics.
There's 59 million of us in this country, right? Of that, if 100,000, if 2% of the people put together $1,000 a year, that's $100 million fund. $100 million that could go into a fund that focuses on litigation, meaning when something happens to an African American, legal fees are already taken care of. That money can be recouped once that criminal lawsuit and civil lawsuit has been completed, but that family is good. Lawyers are paid. That focuses on lobbying, that puts African American needs and desires in the forefront of policies, in the forefront of politicians, the same way any other industry, the same way the NRA does, the same way tobacco does, the same way Big Pharma does. We can put money in front of these politicians to ensure that we get policies that move in our direction, that focuses on education. I heard you mention this earlier, where we can, in any major city, we could have free education, free seminars on finance, free seminars on anything that makes sense that we need, free seminars on politics, things that have been taken out of schools that are very necessary, free seminars on African American history. And I'm not talking about history from we landed here as slaves history.
Yeah.
I'm talking about history from the fact of we were enslaved engineers. We were enslaved doctors and shamans. We were enslaved people that came from a beautiful continent that had all these roles. I'm talking about protection, being able to put dollars into a security group that can come and assist and help during protests that look like us, that could also be leased out by other companies so it's financially solvent. I'm talking about having a Black Lives Matter fund, a financial group that can focus on finances and get an average 2, 3, 4, 5, 6% a year in the market, so that all those people that are putting $1,000 a year into this can pull a dividend. I'm talking about something that's controlled by a group, a panel of chairmen, of entrepreneurs, of scientists, of lawyers that look like us, that we can ensure that money moves the way it needs to and people are taken care of. This is not rocket science. We can take care of our own problems. There's a solution right there. It may not be a perfect solution, but we have to start somewhere.
So I need for you to get with Venetia, and then you and Venetia schedule how we gonna do all this, and then we all get together and have scheduled meetings on this.
We can make that happen. Yeah.
Because like you said, it's not rocket science.
This is not rocket science.
No.
The European American crew has been doing this for decades, since the beginning of the stock market.
Yeah, it's not rocket science at all. So I agree with you on that. I want to thank both of you all for coming. Definitely have to check out your
Come on through.
beauty supply.
Yeah, me
Don't
too,
have to
man.
check that out.
We got
Cullen.
dread stuff.
I haven't
We
been
got
on
products.
Cullen in
Yeah.
a long time.
Got stuff for everybody.
So we're going to take a quick break, and I'll be right back to close out this show. I would like to thank all my guests that was here with me today on the show. And always remember, always empower, always encourage. Continue to remove your mask, rise up, and let's make a change.